Been up and down so many times in my life. Made and lost 3 or 4 fortunes, and the first 2 or 3 were pretty difficult. But after that, you just sort of get used to brushing yourself off. And the way I look at it is, we don't have the time to drive ourselves crazy with anxiety. That's just wasted time, and I want to be happy. Okay.
Yeah. I'm with Jeff Timan. We're just talking. He was asking me, how many of these podcasts have you done? And I said, well, tomorrow's 100. So, we're coming along on this. Yeah, this has been 3 years. It's amazing how quickly it goes. And I've had some really amazing, interesting people, including yourself. You're very unique in a lot of ways, I think, for this show, because you have a multi-dimensional background, not only in art, which we're going to really get into, but you also own and run the Hacienda del Sol, which is probably the premier hotel in Tucson. I think it's got to be right there.
The premier in my life, that's for sure.
Well, I think,
and I don't run it, just to be clear. I'm one of the managing members of it, but we have a complete management staff, and
But it's your baby.
Yes, it is, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure it is.
When you have to make a decision, they come to Jeff.
Well, and other people, of course. It's not just a one-person show by any means, but I have some influence there.
Yeah. Well, I think that's true with anything. I just don't make decisions by myself in this gal. I may own it, I may be the president, but I sure as hell get input from other people on about a lot of things, and I use them.
Whether you want it or not.
Yeah, that's very true. But often, I find that I do better if I get more opinions on certain things that I might not see it from a youth standpoint or a female standpoint. So I like to get my wife's input, my staff's input.
We have a multidimensional world, so it's hard to be able to deal with everything, and things are changing so fast. Especially these last couple of months have been pretty outrageous.
Yeah, you couldn't see anything like this coming, could you?
No. Not really.
I don't think the world saw it coming, really. I follow that material. I knew things were happening back in February. I ordered masks and different things in February even seeing,
that's pretty good.
Yeah, even seeing and watching it,
Yeah, and they had the CIA who was telling them, listen, this is one of the biggest threats to the United States. Is a pandemic coming, and I'd heard that. Many people had. Did anyone act on it or really take it seriously? Not many people did, and we're paying the price for it now. But can you really be worried about every little thing that comes up, that could be a danger later on?
Right.
It's difficult because our input is immense right now.
Yeah. Well, you're in one of the hardest, if not the hardest hit areas, I would think,
I would imagine. Sure. We're flat on our back. We have almost no income. The hotel's still open. But the restaurant's closed. We have some takeout, but frankly, that costs us money to be providing food on such a low scale. The number of people that you need, and the infrastructure that you need. It's really more of a public service than it is to help the hotel.
Yeah. But would it be helpful, because we do have so many Tucson listeners too, if people did go and order food from Hacienda del Sol as takeout, if they get the amount up, does it change?
It would, but probably not so significantly that it would make a difference on profits.
Yeah.
Of course, cash flow is wonderful, and we are doing it anyway. So from that perspective, anything that we sell is wonderful and helpful. We are opening the restaurant on Thursday. I guess city or statewide now, they're letting them open today or yesterday.
They opened yesterday.
I don't know what the response has been. I understand some places have been very busy. We're going to be very judicious about it. making sure that the distance is far apart. We're not opening the main part of the restaurant. We're opening our terrazza, which is partly outside, partly enclosed with air conditioning, but still with big distances between people and tables and that sort of thing.
And you have the staff wear gloves and masks. And all that stuff.
It's a whole new paradigm, isn't it? I had to imagine a waiter coming to your table with a mask. I still don't have the picture in my mind what that's going to look like.
You're going to have it on what day? Thursday?
On Thursday night. Yeah, that's our opening night.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it though. I mean, if you're 6-10 feet, your tables will probably be 10 feet apart, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And if everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, especially if you can sit outside with the wind, little breeze blowing, I could see it being very fine.
Yeah. Hopefully the weather will calm down a little bit for the next little while. And of course, once it gets dark or towards sunset, it's much cooler and easy to be outside. Of course, as the summer comes along, I mean, that's death in Tucson anyway, as far as business is concerned. So,
though it may be different this year with people maybe not leaving as soon as they do.
It's possible.
Yeah. So this will air in a week. So by the time this comes up, he'll have his restaurant going. If you feel comfortable doing it, I highly recommend going out and giving some support.
That would be very wonderful, of course. My concern is with the nation in general, and whether we're opening things up too soon, or whether people will be conscious about social distancing. And,
right. I think in a weird way, I think most people, at least I think a lot of people in Tucson, I can't speak for everywhere, but Tucson, I think will be fairly good about this because, one, we're an older population. I think they've taken it very seriously for the most part. And I think people are scared, and they should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we could open to the public now. Last week, actually, if we wanted. And we chose to, this is
just by appointment only.
Only by appointment through all of May. If somebody has something. And, and for the clients, it's great because they can call, they can come and have their own slot. They know there's not going to be anybody else around other than us. We all wear masks and gloves. So for us, I think that's the smart move. And I'm going to reevaluate in June. And if it still seems that way, I'm going to do the same thing in July and the same thing in August, same thing. I'm just going to literally take it by the numbers.
Yeah.
And I think it's safer for my clients and it's safer for my staff.
There may be changes that we're going to be with permanently, and that may be one of them. Probably not in your business, but I think a lot of businesses are going to be re-examining their business model.
They have to.
And maybe it'll just be by appointment only. And there's a certain exclusivity to that a lot of your clients might really enjoy.
Well, I think there is something about that. They can have pretty much the gallery to themselves. And which allows people like myself to be able to spend time with a person. I don't, there's less distractions on my end or my staff's end. And we're one of the lucky ones. So, I mean, I have a business that can do that.
Well, you have a wonderful gallery. For one thing, it's like walking through a museum in here. You always see something new and interesting, and it's immense.
But, but for your business, I'm sure you've lost sleep on more than one.
No, not really.
You're good about that.
I've been up and down so many times in my life. I've made and lost 3 or 4 fortunes, and the first 2 or 3 were pretty difficult. But after that, you just sort of get used to brushing yourself off. And, the way I look at it is we don't have the time to drive ourselves crazy with anxiety. That's just wasted time, and I want to be happy.
Yeah, and you not only wasted time, but it's actually unhealthy.
Yeah, I imagine it is.
It's very unhealthy, yeah. I had somebody on a few weeks ago, Seymour Reichland, who's a endocrinologist, and his field, and he's 96 years old, and his field is talking about stress and how it affects somatically disease. And he was one of the foremost and first individuals to recognize that there was this relationship between stress and issues.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are going to have health issues because they do just that. They worry. They get concerned. They don't exercise. They don't eat properly. They don't get sleep or proper sleep. And it really affects the way you function. So by being upbeat, and you are, I mean, I've talked to you a few times during this, and I'm just amazed at really, your fortitude and how upbeat you are, considering you run a hotel and a restaurant.
Yeah, well, I think you kind of have to be that way because every day's an adventure, and you can't just let yourself be in the wind with everything that comes along. What's important, becomes a lot more paramount and obvious as well.
So some of this must have come from early on when you're a kid. Where did you grow up?
I grew up mostly in Tucson. I was born in New York, and we lived out in Long Island. My dad commuted into the city every day. He was a real estate attorney and commuted into the city every morning on the train. So it was a interesting upbringing, I would say. He had a number of very wealthy friends, and from early on, I sort of recognized that they weren't particularly happy people, and it just seemed so odd to me that
they have money, but they're there's no the other.
Yeah. So, kind of early I learned, that's not the whole story. Certainly it's part of the story, but
What about your dad? Was he happy?
He was pretty happy. He had he was a Polish immigrant. He came to America when he was 13, didn't speak a word of English. He'd tell me I had 5 jobs. I used to deliver drugs for the pharmacies and, all these things. And never as a hardship, but just as a matter of course. Yeah, that was what his life was like. And he put himself through law school and started a big company late in his life. And
what was that company?
It was Horizon Corporation.
Yeah.
And was just a very charismatic kind of person. He had a way about him that made people happy to do the things that he wanted them to do. And that was a good lesson for me, for sure. Even though I don't emulate him quite in the same way. He was very dynamic, powerful.
Yeah, you're a dynamic guy, too.
Well, in a low-key sort of way. I'm a Tucsonan, so, we're pretty casual.
But you're never
here.
afraid to ask a question if you don't know. I've gone on an art tour with you.
Yeah.
And, if you don't know or if you have your opinion, you're more than happy to jump in, which is a self-assured person, in my opinion. So I'm sure part of that may have come from
I've gotten over being humiliated, so I guess.
Well, that's right. Yeah. Well, I think that comes with self-assuredness. You don't mind, I do. You don't mind saying, I don't know. It's easy to try to pretend you do and you don't, and then you don't learn.
Yeah.
And so did he come over in like the 20s, your dad?
He came over right after World War I.
Oh, so it was a little later. So
yeah.
And so
just,
somewhere in
like
that
1920, 1921, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he went through the pandemic flu of 1918.
He did. Yeah.
For sure.
Of course. Sure. I've never talked to him about it. Of course, he's passed away long since, but he never mentioned that. He, his thoughts were New York City, in the 1920s, which you can imagine was
and they had prohibition at that time, but they didn't, but they did.
Right.
And
he grew up through that.
Yeah, and he's like he comes over when he's 13, right?
Yeah.
So he's going right through that through his teenage years and early adult years, and somehow getting an education as well, right? Because he didn't speak any English, right?
No, he didn't speak English. No, he spoke Yiddish, basically.
Wow. Did he come over with his family, everybody, or was it just him?
He came over with his mother and 3 other children, and then his father had come before the war and actually scraped together the money to bring them after the war.
Wow.
And then they had another child once his mother came over as well. So.
And then he also goes through the Depression.
Yeah.
And that and I know that had to affect you in some ways because My dad was a Depression era baby.
Oh, you bet.
Yeah.
You know, very frugal. I wouldn't say cheap, but because they weren't cheap, but they were very careful, you know, how they spent money because they saw how quickly it can evaporate.
Yeah. And that, I think that affects children of Depression era kids.
I think it's going to affect our generation. I mean, what's happening right now is
Yep.
going to teach people, you know, we need to be a lot more careful and less indulgent than we were. And that may be a good thing that happens. I hope so.
Yes, no, I think there is some of that. I mean, it's whether it's good or not is going to be the way it will, because, I mean, you know, I bet you turn off lights when you leave your house.
Right? I do, even now, and we have solar.
Yeah, but that's ingrained as a child.
It sure is.
You know, don't leave the lights on, you're wasting
Oh,
electricity.
my goodness,
right?
you're bringing back some memories. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I can't go to bed or leave the house without turning off all the lights and making sure I'm not wasting them.
I don't know about you, but it drove my kids crazy, you know, when I would sort of impart that same wisdom. You
My
know,
kids
to
do
them,
it.
and
They know to do it.
Yeah.
Because it's still like, why aren't you? You know,
Right.
and
why?
and-
You know, really,
yeah.
even if it's minimal, it's something.
It is something.
You know, it's
Waste not,
just
want
a
not,
consciousness.
is
Right.
the old statement.
Yeah. Exactly.
So did you actually grow up in New York for most of the time and then move to Tucson?
No, I was about 8 years old when we came west. So I remember New York.
I see.
And have gone back there frequently. Have relatives
Yes.
back there, but mostly it was out here. We moved to Bear Canyon. One of the first place we lived was
Oh my gosh.
a ranch way out in the middle of the canyon. I like a very short horseback ride to get to ride into that canyon. It was fabulous. My dad loved to ride.
And what year
Loved
was
to
this when
ride.
you guys came? Do you remember?
It was 1958. Yeah,
So you came in 58 and you were 8?
I was actually 9.
9 at
but
that time.
Yeah.
And so did you grow up on a horse somewhat?
Oh yeah, absolutely, sure. And you know, in the summers I'd go work on a ranch in New Mexico.
Where?
And near Berlin, Berlin, New
I
Mexico,
know.
South Albuquerque.
I
about
grew up in New
40
Mexico, so
miles
I know
or so.
exactly
Oh,
where
yeah.
Berlin. Yeah, they have some of the best runners in
Yeah.
Berlin. They always would kill us.
The first when we went there, we said, "Well, how big is the ranch?" And they'd point that mountain there to that mountain over there.
And what were you doing? Were you doing
Fixing
cowboying?
fences mostly. Yeah.
Oh my God! You were fixing barbed wire fences?
Yeah.
Oh, that's horrible work.
Oh no, it's not pleasant at all.
That's so hard.
Even with gloves, you end up getting cut.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's
And you did that all summer?
all summer, right?
Wow!
Yeah.
And you did it for more than one summer?
Yeah.
You did. Oh my gosh!
It was
Oh,
fun.
that.
But mostly one. Mostly it was just one summer.
But and how old were you when you did that?
I was 15.
Oh, that's
So it was
interesting.
right.
John.
I learned how to drive on that ranch. You know, we'd get in a pickup and the rancher didn't like the way I drove.
Sure not.
You're gonna burn out the clutch and blah.
You might be right. He probably was.
Yeah.
And was that you wanted to go to the ranch, or was that you're 15?
No, I
and
love
your parents
horses.
goes.
Me and my best friend,
You both went.
Buddy Paul, yeah, who is a local from here. Yeah, we both went out there.
Is he still
Loved
around too?
horses.
Is he still?
He's alive. He lives in Idaho now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you basically cowboyed.
Yeah.
As a 15. Yeah, that'll change you. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it did. Yeah. Especially the branding part. My job was to get the calves into the chute.
Yes.
Oh man, that is the dirtiest job
yeah.
because you're working from the back. Of
Yeah,
the
no,
calf.
I know. I've watched it. I've never had to actually do much with it.
It's always the youngest, least experienced person. Get in there and get that calf in the chute.
Yeah, a little stress-related GI problems.
Whoa, yeah. They all seem to poop at pretty much the same time.
Yeah. Right when you're going down.
Right.
Close. And so then you graduated high school here in Tucson?
I did, Amphi.
And so that was what?
66.
Okay, so when you graduate, it's Vietnam War is going on.
Yep.
And so how did that affect you? Were you involved in that, or were you go to college?
No, I was did some draft dodging, but other than that, not too much. I did go to basic training for the National Guard.
Yes.
And that was certainly an eye-opening experience for me.
But you were managed to not have to be sent over.
No, but it's funny. I mean, this is a long time ago, but I and about 5 or 6 other people in our regiment were National Guard, and everybody else was drafted or regular Army. And they said, oh, only about 20% of you guys are going to go to Vietnam, but they took them all.
Yeah.
They all went except for the National Guard folks.
Wow.
So that was pretty disconcerting.
Yeah, I mean, it was a devastating time for people in their teenage years and 20s.
Well, it was
dying.
It was formative, that's for sure. It put things in perspective. The people that had to pay the price for that were usually, people who weren't too well off and
right.
didn't have alternatives and that sort of thing. So
I'm sure you had friends that went over.
Oh yeah, plenty of them. Some who died and some who were wounded mentally, as
yes. Right.
when they came back. It was difficult.
And so didn't go to Woodstock or anything like that because you're at that time
frame,
right?
No, I didn't. But my partner Rick Fink went. He was there. I was traveling that summer and didn't really. That whole culture was a little behind. Now Tucson was kind of counterculture. About 69, but we used to joke that things were 3 or 4 years behind Tucson. The rest of the nation would go through it, and then we would, like our first anti-war demonstration was like 1971.
Yeah.
The war was almost over anyway, but that was and still is, I think, one of the joys of Tucson is, we take our time to.
Yeah. Well, and in some ways, I think we're trendsetters in very interesting ways. I think for food we are. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's true or not?
Oh, definitely.
I think so. I mean, it seems like we're a very foodie-related community. And
definitely. And I think Llanos had a lot to do with that. And, of course, our Mexican culture, is instrumental in that as well. So.
And I think art, too. We're very much as an art community here. I find to see that.
Definitely. I would say more so than Phoenix in spite of now Phoenix is definitely getting there. But it's more part of our culture, our innate culture. I think people are a little bit less concerned about the grind of business and that sort of thing, and a little take more time, to enjoy the culture and
I think we're older, for one thing. We're an older city, and we have the environment seems to be much more in play than it is in Phoenix. We don't have the grass and the all the concrete. Sorry about all my Phoenix listeners, but it's true.
Yeah.
And I think that does kind of go hand in hand with artists wanting to be in that environment, and so they come here. I mean, there's some great ones.
They're appreciated here, I think, a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, Ed Mell is in Phoenix, but when he was growing up in Phoenix, it was Tucson. So, and now it's not.
Yeah.
And so you graduate in '66, and did you go to college?
I did. I went to the U of A.
And what was your degree? What were you trying to get your degree in at that time?
I got a degree in business. I wanted to do something that would sort of transcend, and took a number of art courses as well. And then
you were interested in art at that time, right?
I was. Yep.
Were you making art as a kid too, before in high school and junior high?
Not too much. Not too much, I would say. I was just a regular kid. I enjoyed baseball and horseback riding, of course. And girls. That was kind of my main influence, I would say. But I got into college and went to, I had a couple of classes in the College of Fine Arts and made a short movie there that I really enjoyed.
Is that still
that process?
Is that still in existence? That movie?
I don't know. I haven't seen it in probably 30 years or so. But
what was the movie on?
It was about a couple, and a sign of the times. One of them was a heroin user, but they had a romance, and then I thought it was pretty avant-garde. I had shots of him, shooting up and so forth. It was a bit grimy, and then of course he had to OD at the end of the movie, and
so what was
sort of prescient for today's.
Yeah, and so
wasn't that
were you
common back
doing
then.
it as a statement saying, this is what can happen, anti-drug, or was it just the opposite?
Neither one, really. It was
just your sign of
right.
what you were going through at that time in America.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going through it,
I know.
and my friends really were not. Although there was a certain amount of heroin use in the broad community that I was part of. But
well, that's the late '60s.
But I was always afraid of needles and never did that. So
found other ways.
Well, yeah, of course. That was the times.
It was the times. Yeah, it was very much of a drug culture in the late '60s and early '70s, I think. And then it switched to different things in the '80s, to cocaine and all the things that went on there.
Right.
And now it's everything. I don't know.
I don't know. It's not that.
It's not our culture, but oxycodone clearly is a huge problem for a lot of people.
Such a weird drug, isn't it? I mean, I've had that for medical uses, and I never saw the attraction of oxycodone. Maybe, I don't know why, but certainly
I don't know. I don't think I've ever actually had any, but any of those opioid type things, it dulls the senses, and if you are maybe in a place that's not happy and you're depressed, it's just being dulled is better than
it
being
didn't make me happy.
No.
I would say I had a couple knee replacements was my experience with it, and they give you that for those. And
works for pain for sure.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it did. It definitely did for pain, but I never had any desire to take it other than that.
Right. I think people get on it and then they get hooked, and then that's it. Then the desire to have it is the craving, because it's highly addictive.
Addictions are so weird, aren't they?
Nobody
wants to be.
No,
addicted.
It's another form of a disease. It's like being hooked on smoking or any other.
Which I was at one time. I feel incredibly blessed to have been able to get away from it. But
so you're a big smoker at one time?
Yeah, well, I smoked about a pack a day for a number of years, and actually that was another thing that I started doing as a cowboy. That's why I learned how to do that.
Probably when you had your first drink too.
And there's no upside to smoking. I just don't. I mean, even though I was into it, I have no idea what the attraction was for it, because it's certainly not very attractive, from an outside aesthetic point of view, and it doesn't even get you high,
right?
So I just that you would take something into your lungs. I guess once you're addicted to it, that's what you need. But if you're not, you wouldn't in a million years think to do it.
I think a lot of it is that kids start. You don't see like a 30 or 40-year-old go, I'm going to take up smoking as a general rule. It's usually you take it up as a kid. I think a lot of it is to be adult, to be more, mature. That's what adults do. Then they get hooked, and then that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it happened to me.
Yeah,
it happened to me, and
it's a strong addiction, as you well know.
It sure is. It's probably the hardest thing to get over. I mean, I've never had a heroin addiction or an opioid addiction, but cigarettes, they're everywhere. You can buy them in a store for $4 or $5, and back when I was in college it was 30 cents a pack or something. It was incredibly easy to get and to use, and they were accepted and legal and all that stuff. And
Yeah, I used to teach a smoking cessation class at the.
Is that so?
Yeah, at the medical school at the university.
That's how I finally broke it. Believe it or not, it was a Seventh-day Adventist course, which to this day I don't know what Seventh-day Adventists are about, really. And it was not a religious thing at all. It was a 5-day plan to quit smoking. I went with my mom and one of my best friends, and we all quit. And it was.
Did they all stay quit?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good.
They did. Yeah.
And I used to tell people when they're in that course, it's like heroin. This is exactly like heroin, and you're gonna. It's that difficult. And then they would always say, "Well, have you ever had heroin, or have you ever smoked?" And I go, "No, but I've never had diabetes either, and I've treated that." So I understand the pathology of smoking. It's
it's insidious. It's insidious, and the fact that it's so easy to get and to do it.
And you can be very smart, very educated, and you still are on it, and you're just like, I can't get off it.
Yeah. So I don't think most smokers want to be addicted to smoking. They don't really
at
want
some
a
point.
cigarette.
At some point, they don't want to be on it. Some, I'm not as sure they enjoy it.
If you need a cigarette and you smoke one, it helps. But
well, your body gets used
another
to
one.
it. Yeah. Well, we have nicotinic receptors in our bodies, so that's one of the reasons.
I had never heard that word before.
Yeah, so that's one of the problems with nicotine is we actually have the receptors that are built into our bodies. So immediately binds.
Interesting.
Yeah. And we have other things I think that we don't even know about related to art. I mean, you're compelled to be in art. You are. I mean, you get a degree in business from the U of A, right? Mm-hmm. And so what do you do with that?
I never really did anything except I learned how to read financial statements, and I had a business law class that was wonderful. Gosh, I mean, that thing has made me so much money just knowing the rules of, what constitutes a contract, and that venue of ideas, just to bring you into why does this work, what's important, and
that was through one single class?
Yeah, just one single class. Yeah, that was it. That back then it was before Eller School, and the business school was not as well established as it is today, because I've been to some Eller School classes and it's hands and feet above what the experience that I had. It's really very, very professional.
Yeah, we have world class here.
It's
one of the
wonderful.
Best in the country.
But I had accounting, which was pretty. I was an accounting major, and that was pretty systematic, and I learned about how to read those reports, and what was important and what wasn't, and what decided whether you had a profit or not,
right?
And taxes and things like that. So, but the law course, that was it. That really cemented my ability to go out in the world and make money and be secure in the decisions that I was making.
Just because you could know what you should and shouldn't do and the travails that may happen if you do this or that legally. Yeah, interesting.
Yep, it was vital, I would say.
And have you followed up over the years of trying to learn more about law and that sensibilities for business?
Oh no, thank God I didn't. I was sort of headed for becoming a lawyer, and it was just too daunting for me. It was a little nerve-wracking, the detail, the level of detail that you have to have was not my forte at all. I would have gotten lost in that, and I don't think I would have been a very happy human being.
And even when you were young at that age, did you know happiness was important?
Oh, it was the most important, always.
That's unusual, I think, especially of that generation, our generation, to rank. I'm with you on that, but to rank happiness that high in how you do things, a lot of people don't do that.
I don't understand that. Of course, you need to eat. You need to, have shelter and take care of your family and that sort of thing. So those are certainly rise above.
Right.
But, that said, once those are done,
right.
What would you rather?
Why do we do it all if we're not not happy?
If you can't enjoy it and enjoy your life, we have such a short time on this world, and that becomes a lot more obvious in a time like this when I'm sure you've had friends who have been affected.
Yeah,
and I have. Unfortunately, way too many.
Yeah, no, there's some that are really getting, and I think we're a little insulated probably in Tucson that people don't know so many people that have been affected, but for people like myself, I've got a friend whose mother-in-law was died of COVID, and left kids, and so it's the Navajo Nation and a lot of the Pueblo tribes are getting pretty much devastated by this disease.
It's daunting.
Yeah.
What do you do? They're so torn between making a living and being safe.
Right.
It's there's no easy solution to this one, and it didn't seem like it was going to be what's a little sickness, but right. It's it transcends that.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we understood. Most people, even as a physician, you still don't understand what a real true pandemic is. I've read about it, I knew about it, I've lectured about it, but to really then go through the process, and we're doing it in an isolated fashion, really. I mean, you want to really go through the process, go live in New York City somewhere like that, where you're really feeling the full brunt of this beast.
I have a brother there, he's petrified. He can't wait to figure out a way to get out of the city.
And so he lives there. He lives in New York City?
And you imagine, you're in an apartment complex that has 50 stories.
Right.
And there's, not too many people are taking the stairs. And even if they do, there's other people that are using it. You're going into a little elevator that,
right.
How many thousands of people have been in that elevator? There's no getting away from it. You're going to get it somehow, on some level, sooner or later.
Do you think he'll stay in New York City after this?
No,
he's going to move?
He's leaving, yeah.
So this has been it. It's going to move him out. And what will he do? Does he know? Or
well,
where will he go?
He's a techie, and he can work from home. He's talking about going to either South Carolina or Ohio. He doesn't want to go to either one, but he's got opportunities there. So.
And he just doesn't want to go through this process ever again?
No. He's living with a couple of older folks, so he has to be ultra careful about what he brings, to the apartment where he's living. And so, have you gone to the grocery store since the pandemic started?
No.
I've been. It was amazing the things that you have to think about. You're about to pick up an apple to test whether who else touched that?
Right. But it does change.
It never ends.
Yeah, it does change the way you think about things.
How to navigate through that is a whole learning experience that you just never. Who considered picking up a pen from somebody? My son was looking. My son who lives in Berkeley. Was the first one to say, "Dad, Mom, you got to be careful. It's coming. It's going to change your life. Be careful. Wear a mask." This was like back in February. Yeah. He was saying all this stuff. And he said he was watching a movie the other day, and somebody, handed a pen to somebody else to sign a contract, and he was aghast.
Yeah. Well, it's true. I mean, when you do look at movies and things with people hugging and doing all that, you have this immediate reaction of, oh my God. That's the question, is how long that stays with us,
Yeah.
And personally, I don't think it's good if we don't have human touch and all those kind of things. We need to get back to that at some point. We have to do things in moderation. We have to do things smart, and I guess because I was a physician, I've always been kind of careful of those kind of things, washing my hands, having a pen that I use on my own. I've always done those kind of things anyway, so you don't get flu, influenza, or colds and things like that. So we will have to modify behaviors.
Yeah, most of us never had those thoughts.
No, they didn't.
And me, I'm a hugger.
No, I know.
And it's
it's hard, right?
Yeah,
because your immediate first
and
response,
I want it. I want to touch people.
Yeah, your first response, I'm sure, is to give me a big bear hug or a hand or shake. Right?
Absolutely,
and,
absolutely.
And have you gotten to the point where it feels normal not to do that yet?
No, I've shook one person's hand in the last 2.5 months, and that was Curt Brill, and it was by accident. He was bringing a piece of his, a big bronze to the show we have at the Hacienda now, I hadn't seen him in months, and I immediately shook his hand, and he shook my hand, and we both looked at each other and said, "Oh." So
yeah, we actually represent Curt here. I don't know.
Oh,
if
do
did.
you?
Yeah, we do have his.
Oh,
work.
yeah, I've seen your ceramics of his.
Yeah,
He's got a beautiful bronze. It's like 10 feet tall. It's the nation's first pop-up drive-through sculpture show.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So you're part of. Well, you really kind of headed up this whole from the beginning, right? The sculpture. Tucson Sculpture.
Me and Stephen Kimball and Barbara Gragudis.
Yeah, tell us about this. This is something that was started. This will be the third year.
No, well, we've had 2 festivals, and this was supposed to be the third that we had to cancel this year. We were ready to go, but it was in April, and the whole world was closing up in March, so we canceled it. But we'd been actually working together for a year and a half before the first festival. So it's been over 4 years that we were heading up Sculpture Tucson, and the whole idea was to get art, public art,
right,
and to help artists
for Tucson.
For Tucson, yeah, it's a gift to Tucson.
And is there a website? Is it sculpturetucson.com?
.org.
.org. So sculpturetucson.org.
That's it.
So you 3 came together and said, okay, let's bring sculpture to Tucson. We can help artists make money.
Not necessarily bring it, but bring it more into the public venue.
Right.
And because we'd all seen, in other cities and around the world, how important public art is to people. It gives them a sense of identity and love and all that.
How did you guys come up with this idea? How did this evolve?
Well, I guess it started in back maybe 10 or 12 years ago. I got the idea to build a sculpture garden at the Jewish Community Center.
Right.
And from that project, I met Barbara Gragudis. And, for some reason she liked me. She's a very well-known public artist. She had done a number of amazing projects, and she has a book out too that's really interesting about a number of the projects that she's done. And she liked me, which didn't exactly surprise me, but it sort of, I thought, wow, she's really a well-known public sculptor, and she likes me. She thinks I have something to say, so that gave me, And she said, well, we need to work on something together. And again, I wasn't quite sure she was serious, but I said, well, absolutely, And then a number of years passed, and we happened to keep running into each other, and she'd say something, and I'd say, okay. And then finally I got the time, and the hotel was doing well. You never know from year to year.
Right.
And so I said, let's put a group together and see about getting some public art out. And she was very receptive. And Steve Kimball, who owns Metal Arts Village, he built that a number of years ago, which is a really interesting business model that I've told him a number of times I really admire, and I think it should be duplicated. Basically what he does is he makes condos or apartments, but for creating art in there. It's built specially with garage doors and the ability to move things in and out. And And Steve was a reformed lawyer, and he was receptive as well, and businessman, and had a legal sense about him. So it was a really instrumental part of the group as well. And then things evolved. Obviously, the Loveland Sculpture Show kind of came into our consciousness.
Yeah, it would have to.
And so we thought, well, that might be a nice model to use. And it is a nice model to use.
Did you go up and visit it to see what it was?
Yep. And they were very receptive to us too. They were really nice to us, and
That's
they
nice.
showed us everything that they did behind the scenes, and what the volunteers did, and all their procedures and everything. And we modified it to fit us.
Right.
And I think it's still a valuable venue for artists to have. We're kind of changing things around a little bit. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen after this year, whether, I'm sure it'll change in some ways. Frankly, I personally, and I think the group wants it to be a little more edgy and maybe more artist-centric.
Versus arts and crafts?
Perhaps. And, I tried to introduce music into it. We had poetry reading last year, which was not a huge success, but, we're trying things, and
they got a lot of people to come to it. I mean, I went out to it, and I was really actually quite surprised how many people were there.
Well, people in Tucson want that.
It clearly did. I mean, there was 1,000 people there, and a lot of artists, and well laid out, all outside. Of course, it's that's the best way for sculpture. And that's going on now, actually, right? So it got canceled in April, and then
right.
So tell us what's going on now with what's.
Well, this guy Thomas Perry, who works with us at Sculpture Tucson, came up with the idea one day. He says, "Look, we have all these artists who have wanted to be in the show. They were preparing pieces for the show, so they have work. Most of these people, the only way they make a living is to have a show, is for the public to come and see their work. You have a parking lot that you just built at the Hacienda del Sol that nobody is going to use because guess what? You have virtually no guests. So let's put two and two together. You can't social mingle. So why don't we have a drive-through sculpture show?" And I thought, wow, that's, even if nothing happens, we'll have the art there.
Yes.
And someone will enjoy it. And it's been, constant. Cars have been going through there, every minute there's one or two cars going through that sculpture show, and sometimes 10 or 12 at the same time.
So everything's set up in this huge parking lot. And this was your new parking lot for the expansion you were doing in your hotel.
Right. Yeah, really good timing.
Well, for this at least it was. So you have this huge parking spot, and you have how many artists are in this show?
We have 25 artists.
So 25 artists have set up work outside that you can take your car and just drive through and stop and look and not get out of your car.
And you can get out of your car if you want to. I mean, it's not like there's crowds of people walking around. So often people do. They want to get a little closer up look. We have a little poster of each artist and their work and what they'd sell it for and that sort of thing.
Are the artists there at all?
Some, but not very much.
Yeah,
not very. It's too hot for the most part to be hanging out there all day. But there were a few, especially the opening night, and then over Mother's Day weekend, a couple of the artists would come and hang out a little bit and that sort of.
But
thing.
If somebody wants to, they go, "Oh, this is really great. I'd like to buy this." Is there a way they can take a picture of the information with their phone and then contact the artist?
Yes. And then we have flyers with Sculpture Tucson's contact information on it as well. But Yeah. Regrettably, it's probably not the best sales tool in the world. I mean, it would be smarter to have, someone there all the time and the ability to talk to people. But I figure,
Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah.
You're a nonprofit. You don't really have staff, right?
No, we have a couple of we have one employee and then one contractor, I guess you'd say.
Is there somebody out there to help them if they need it, or not really?
Not most of the time, but there's people around.
But there's information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And can they go to the sculpturetucson.org and
Yes.
get information there too?
They can.
Yeah.
Yep. There's information on the garden, and there's a phone number that they can call as well.
Do you know what that is by any chance?
It's 334-5871.
334-5871.
That's it.
There you go. And that's 520.
Mm-hmm.
Area code.
520. Yeah.
And so, how long will this sculpturetucson.org opening? How long is this going to go on?
It's going to be till the end of May,
Okay.
May 30th.
So they have
So
a couple
last day.
weeks that they can go and see this.
Yeah.
And then the sculptors will come and take the material away. And
Right.
well, some will
leave them. A couple of the artists want it, they're bulky and they're not from Tucson, so they've asked if they could. And of course, we have tons of sculpture on the ground.
I know. I was going to say it'd be fantastic to put it out in your, around the restaurant and the hotel.
Absolutely.
And then let them, once clients come back, they can buy it directly from you, and you can work that way too.
Yeah, that's possible. Sure. Now, the art that we have at the hotel typically, the hotel doesn't take a percentage of that. We feel like the art is there and it enhances the environment, and we're pretty artist centric as well, So
You are very artist centric. Why is that? Why do you think that is?
I think about that a lot, and I think it's because it's just the bent that I happen to have. I think it's the thing that I can do to respond to society, I guess. I'm not a surgeon, thankfully not a lawyer. The tool that I have is my appreciation for art.
And you make art too.
And I make it too as well, yeah. So I hope that helps people, I kid with my cohorts at Sculpture Tucson that we're promoting sculpture to save the world. You know, if people were enjoying art, and they're probably not going to be fighting.
Yeah.
And so, that may be a little too lofty, but
I don't know. Art has a way of doing things.
You can.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. I found for myself watching all the things on news and everything's remotely from people's houses. So many of these people have no art in their homes, or at least in the place they shoot the video. I mean, it just shocks me. And then every once in a while you see some and it's like, oh my gosh, yeah. You can tell this person has a sense of art and wants to be around it. Yeah. And it shows me how few people have art that it's a really, I think, I can't imagine it because it's such an integral part of who I am and what how I see the world.
I just maybe think they don't have the experience.
That's right. A lot of it is. That's right. They don't have exposure.
Yeah. Once they do, I think their eyes start to open
it's true.
Little bit.
Yeah. You can open the most closed eyes if you can just spend a little time and show them what it is and why.
Yeah. And, even if you don't particularly like it, it's kind of interesting. It makes you think. And I almost like the more controversial things that I don't particularly find aesthetic. And, you think, well, why did they do that? I mean, they have eyes. They must know that looks awful. Well, there's something to that for sure. Yeah, they do have eyes and they are sensitive and they're making it anyway. And what does that mean?
I think, art should be emotion, all right? You should feel some kind of emotion. It can be really great emotions. It can be happiness, sadness, whatever. can be anger, it can be despair, it can be, but it should evoke something.
It should move you.
It should move you in some level, I think. And that to me is what art is.
To be successful.
To be successful. And it, so it doesn't have to just be straight realism. A lot of people think, oh, it looks like a photo, it's great art. Well, it can be anything. It can be jagged lines that are minimal, and you go, oh, I see, I get it, I feel it. It's like the lightning bolts coming down in a storm, and they've captured that in this amazing way. And how in the world did they do that? And the longer you look at it, the more you realize there's way more to this than you can imagine.
Yeah.
And so
that's the best of it.
That's the best. And you get this, clearly. You definitely get that. So what do you do in your own art?
I'm a metal sculptor.
Yeah.
I weld things together. I like to see metal melt and reform, and I went to after college. I went to Santa Barbara Art Institute, which no longer is, sadly, but I had a really fine sculpture teacher there, and Dwayne Lopnow, his name is. He passed away a few years ago, but he really helped me along quite a bit, with the technique more than anything else.
And were you going to get a degree, or did you get a degree at this school?
I was going to, but that was the last year of the college. It went into bankruptcy after that.
So. Oh, wow. And how old were you when you did that?
I was 22.
So you got your business degree, and then you went into an art school.
Right.
And how long did you stay at the art school before it went bankrupt?
Oh, it was a year.
Yeah. So potentially, if it hadn't gone bankrupt, your life may have been very different.
After that year, I pretty much knew I was not going to be a professional artist. I enjoyed the material world too much,
I see.
And I was not proficient in a sense of being timely. For instance, I made one bronze cast. Well, I made a few bronze casts, but one major piece that I still have. I'm crazy about it. But in the casting, it's a torso, and the back of the torso collapsed within the casting process, and it took me about 4 months to fix that. And even now, I think back on it, I think, oh my God, I want to hold my head in shame. It took me months to figure out. Every time I would heat it up, it would collapse down. I should give it a little more time and put some support there, and that would hold it up. That took me 3 months to figure that out, and then 2 days to fix it once I did. Right? Simple physics, and it was lost on me, unfortunately. So I thought, this probably isn't the way for me to go. As much as I love it, I love the piece, I love the other things that I did there. I love the lifestyle, but it didn't love me.
but you realized that it just probably wasn't what you're going to be best at.
No, clearly not. Yeah.
And so what did you do after that? You got your degree in business, but what did you do?
Well, I still loved the act of creating things. So I became a cabinet maker and furniture maker, and I moved to New York. I worked for Dakota Jackson, who's a New York designer, and also a cousin of mine, and he kind of took me under his wing and almost got sucked into living in New York. But a friend of mine, after about a year and a half, he said, "Hey, I'm moving to Hawaii. You want to come?" I thought, Hawaii, that sounds pretty good.
That sounds really good.
Get to the open spaces, yeah.
And so you went to Hawaii?
Yeah, I lived in a coffee shack for a couple of years, and just made basic furniture and door frames and window frames and some cabinet making and that sort of thing just to get by. I lived in a coffee shack.
Where? Which island?
It was on a big island.
Where?
Honau.
Oh, you lived in Honau.
Yeah.
I know exactly where that is. It's fantastic.
Yeah. and Kealakekua at first, which is right up the road. So
that's one of the best parts of the island, except for the wind.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. I had a great time there, but I guess I got rock fever, and my dad got sick. He had Alzheimer's disease, and I was the one kid in the family that wasn't attached, and they asked me to come back, and I was more than ready to move back to Tucson and help out with the family, and that's how I got involved in the real estate business. My dad had been a real estate man, and so I started kind of overseeing his things and fell in love with that business as well.
And what kind of real estate were you doing in Tucson?
Oh, everything. Everything but residential. I never sold a house, never worked on trying to sell one, but raw land, apartment complexes, shopping centers, offices.
This is
I had an RV park for a long time. That sort of introduced me to the hospitality business, which I really loved.
And you were doing this kind of late 70s is when you started?
Yeah, late 70s, early 80s, into even today, although, not very much anymore. Now it's kind of residual things.
God, you must have seen Tucson change so dramatically from the late 70s.
Yeah, well, and I lived here in the 50s.
Yeah.
And it was, Alvernon was, kind of the extension of the town. Swan certainly was out in the country in those days.
55, there's like 25,000 people here.
It wasn't very many.
We have 1 million now.
Yeah.
So you bought and sold real estate, did commercial real estate too as well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mostly commercial. Yeah.
Build and sell projects and that kind of thing?
I didn't build too much at that point. I like to say, when things went wrong, then I'd, build it. But, for the most part, I'd try to improve it somewhat. If it, buildings, we'd just like to make things a little bit better every year, just keep making it better. And but mostly completed projects by and large, things that were in trouble almost always, shopping centers or apartment complexes that, had some problems.
I would think that's where your art background and your eye would come involved, because you could look at the bones of a commercial project and go, we could do this.
Yeah, it helped.
I would
Definitely.
think a lot, actually.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because if you can't see any road to making it better cosmetically and economically, you're probably going to pass.
Yeah, and of course the first rule of real estate is location. Yeah. So
that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
It is, honestly. It's a really good location.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
Yeah, it's a good location. It took me a while, but I figured it out. And at some point then you have the opportunity to get involved with Hacienda del Sol. Well, tell us about that, because that's a really interesting place with a great history.
It is, yeah. It has a great history. And Hacienda del Sol, well, coincidentally, I grew up right next to it. My folks built a house there, and they bought their house from the Murphys, who originally developed Hacienda del Sol. In fact, it was one of their first projects in the foothills. And they built it as a girls' school in the 20s.
Right.
And it opened for business in September of 1929.
A month before the Great Depression.
A month before the Depression. Yeah, their timing was probably better than mine, even, as far as starting our construction project.
Yeah, when did
month before the pandemic started.
Is that when it started? One month before?
That's when we broke ground, 1 month before. Right?
I'm going to tell you a really quick story about this girls' school, Hawaii, and you. So I go to Hawaii every year, Big Island. I tried to. And this person found me online and said, "Oh, I'm in Hawaii." And I go, "Oh, I'll be there in a month." I show up. We make an arrangement. I meet in the parking lot at FedEx right next to the airport. And she had some nice things. They were very nice early jewelry, but I didn't know anything about the history really. And it turns out her parents, or I think it was her parents, were the owners of Hacienda del Sol Girls' School.
Oh, is that so? Wow.
And I bought their jewelry that was from Tucson. that was bought during that time of the Hacienda del Sol. So the Hawaii thing does full circle.
Isn't that funny?
That interesting. And she goes, "Oh yeah, they owned a girls' school, and it was a place called Hacienda del Sol. You might have heard of it." And I'm like, "Yeah."
Are you still in touch with her?
I still have their information. Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to contact.
Yeah, I can do that. I can arrange it.
That'd be great.
I'll have to look it up, but
I'd like that very much.
So they built it in the 20s, September 29th of 1929.
Right.
And then what happened?
To the hotel.
Yeah.
So it never really had a significant problem that I'm aware of surviving through, because most of the girls that came there were from
East Coast, probably.
Yeah, East Coast, Midwest, but it was the Pillsburys and the Westinghouse, and these folks had money that would never run out, and they all had their own horses, and so they did fine. It was the war that pretty much ended the business, Pearl Harbor. So that was their last school year, was like 1941, 1940, maybe the spring of 42 was. Same
for Los Alamos. They had a boarding school for men.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Manhattan Project took it over in 42, November of 42.
Isn't that something?
Yep.
Fascinating.
Which was filled with art. A lot of the art came from Maria Martinez and Julian Martinez in the boys' school.
Yeah. Wow.
So it ended their career. So the Hacienda del Sol, no more long, a girls' school, closed because of the war. And what happens?
And then once the war ended, they converted it to a hotel, to a dude ranch, they called it. And back then there was no other houses anywhere.
Yeah, it was nothing, right? It was just open desert.
Right.
And that was about 45, 46 that they did that?
Right. Exactly. And then one of the people that became interested in operating the hotel had connections to LA, and Howard Hughes, who was already a friend of the Murphys at that time, because he had built a plant here during the war, or maybe before the war, for building aircraft for the war.
Maynard Dixon's wife, Edith Hamlin, worked at it.
Oh, is that so? Yeah, I love his work. You have still a lot here, don't you?
Yeah.
So he would come here, and then he'd bring all his movie stars, So
this built-in LA connection to the Dude Ranch at Hacienda del Sol.
Right, and it became kind of this hideaway, and Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn would be there, and Clark Gable came there,
I didn't know
and
any of this.
John Wayne, and a number of other movie stars would come and hang out and get drunk and do all that
ride
sort
horses
of thing.
And
We have a picture of Sam Snead. He had just played in the Tucson Open, and I understand, I don't know if this is true or not, that he lost the Open by one stroke on like the last hole. And there he is that night in a trench coat, sitting on a horse inside our courtyard, and his eyes in the photograph are glassy, and he's kind of leaning over, like Lee Marvin in Cat Ballou,
Who also lived in Tucson, right? Funny. Lee Marvin moved to Tucson,
He did, yeah. In fact, my mom sold him a house.
She sold him that Seven Gables home?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
What was he like? Do you know?
I never got to meet him. I saw him around a few times. Yes. I understand he's a wonderful person.
Yeah, interesting.
Very blue collar.
Yeah, I believe that.
And he was fought in World War II, and apparently saw a lot of very bloody action.
That's right. So. He did. I think that is exactly correct.
Yeah.
And a smoker, which is what got him.
Oh.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So the Hacienda del Sol has this wonderful history of LA, the greats coming here in the late 40s through the 60s even?
No, it maybe the early 60s, but it got sold to somebody who was maybe not as accepting of the clientele, that they were getting. In fact, I heard a story. I don't know if it's true. Well, actually, I do know, because the wife of the owner told me that they had interest from, different movie stars, and to come to Frank Sinatra, for instance, wanted to come there, and they said, "Oh, no, we don't want him here."
I can't imagine.
It kind of went a little bland after that, unfortunately. But yeah, its history was a little checkered, like all of America, I suppose, all over the world. Things change. They didn't allow Jews to go there, and we thought that was kind of an interesting revenge of sorts.
The Jewish owner now has it.
Well,
and so when did you get involved with the project, with the hotel?
We bought it in 1995. We closed on my sister's birthday, July 17th.
And what brought you to go, this is what I should own? Because it was old school Tucson, and you kind of grew up?
They were friends of mine that bought it. They bought it out of bankruptcy in 93.
Yes.
And they unfortunately had a fight. The day they bought it, they went to the closing. They had closed the deal. They were all happy. They were going to a celebration. And one of them said something to another one in the car leaving the closing. And that was it. That was like the end of their association. It just imploded minutes after they bought the thing. And two of the three buyers were fairly well-to-do and didn't really need to make it a rousing success right away. One of them, actually two, the Bernsteins, were not too well off, and they had no choice. They put everything they had into that property, and they worked it for the next 2 years. They had weddings. They didn't even have, the restaurant wasn't open because nothing worked. I mean, the water barely came through the pipes. The gas was shut off because of all the leaks. And so what they would do is, if you wanted to have a wedding up there, because it still had a lot of grace and style.
Right, and it's a beautiful location.
Architecture. You could have a wedding there, and they would charge, how many people were coming to your wedding? Oh, there'll be 150. Okay, it's $10 a head. And if you wanted a room, they'd say, okay, you can have this room, and we made the bed, clean sheets and everything. But if you want new sheets, the laundry is up the way. You can go wash your sheets. It got a little more sophisticated maybe as time went on, but they made it work because they didn't have any choice, and that's also the kind of people they were too. They were. And
then you bought it out of bankruptcy in '95.
Not out of bankruptcy. I bought it from those folks. It didn't go bankrupt, but it was still in very rough shape. They weren't able to fix it up. It had been in bankruptcy and was in terrible shape. It was virtually a teardown. In fact, someone had left a plat of the property, and clearly, it was already designed to cut it into little pieces to make it into a housing development. And they didn't have the heart to do it. They'd have made more money if they had done it than selling it to me. But thank goodness they just couldn't bring themselves to do that.
They had moral conviction not to do it.
Yeah.
So then you get it and you turn it into what it should have been.
Into our vision,
the potential
of, I fell in love with it. And, my father always told me, whatever you do, don't fall in love with a piece of real estate. And I didn't for the longest time, but, as soon as I worked into that courtyard, that was it, man. I was done for. It just took me hook, line, and sinker.
I can see it. I can totally see it.
Yeah.
And so you turned it into world-class restaurants, convention areas that people can have conventions, meetings,
small meetings.
Yeah. I've gone to a few of them.
right now we have 59 rooms, and we're in the midst of building another 40. So we'll have just under 100 when we're done.
Yeah, and that's going to continue. You're going to continue through the construction project and get it done.
Well, that's the plan right now. We'll see. We'll see what God has in store for us.
Right.
But yeah.
And so 49 rooms plus meetings. People can, because I've gone to some medical meetings actually in those rooms. Yeah, on more than one occasion actually.
So you're still active.
Yeah, I got rid of my license a few years ago, but I still go to those things. Yeah, I just went and gave a lecture to a bunch of physicians up in Scottsdale actually. To talk about Maynard Dixon and to talk about the show up there, but to also I brought out different medical aspects of his life and things that affect him medically and changed him. And pandemic flu was one of the things that affected him. Yeah, and his smoking, was another one that basically killed him, and all those types of things.
Yeah, but it's ubiquitous, isn't it? I mean, not anymore, but
but
there's still a lot of smokers. But
vaping has brought back into smoking, so.
Yeah.
Just a different form.
It's amazing to think, they'd pass out cigarettes in World War II to soldiers, and you'd think that'd be the last thing in the world.
And they wanted it because it was a stimulant. That's why. And doctors used to promote it, Lucky Strikes, as being healthy. Yeah,
that's pretty funny.
Oh yeah, they would have advertisements. You get your cigarettes; it rejuvenates you. Da da da. Yeah, so we've been hard on cigarettes today, but we should be.
Yeah, well, we're blind a lot of the time to what should be obvious, but apparently it's not. And, we're all guilty of it, I think, on some level.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, to think that, they thought the world was flat until the 1600s.
Well, there's a whole group of people who still think it's flat.
Yeah, they act like it is.
Well, no, they do. They think it's flat. There's a whole group of flat earthers that truly believe that it's flat.
Well, too bad we elected one of them.
So we have now covered the essence of you. Did Hacienda del Sol in 1995. So you've had it for 25 years, right? That's a long time, actually.
Yeah.
And
isn't it? And it's like a minute. It's like yesterday.
Do you see do you have a future plan in your mind for that hotel?
Not really. I'd like to say that I do, but whenever it gets around to us selling it, we just don't seem to have the desire to do it as smart as it would have been probably to have done. From a business point of view, we would have done it, but we like it. Yeah. We all, all the partners really like that property a lot, and we just want to see what we can make of it and, keep taking it.
I mean, it has this panoramic views of both city of Tucson and the Catalina Mountains in the Sonoran Desert, but it's right there in the heart of Tucson.
We're Tucsonans, and it's part of us, and it's part of our life, and so, will we sell it someday? Perhaps, we might just keep on working on it and seeing what comes next. We'd like to get it to a point at this stage anyway, to where it's at least self-sufficient, which may be years away right now. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, these kind of things really throw it backwards, don't they?
Well, who knows what's going to happen. Who knows what's going to happen next. Our bankers are very compassionate, I'd like to say, and they've, a lot of it will probably fall on them as to, whether we have the wherewithal to stay with it. But they like us, and they know we're good operators.
Yes, you are.
So
I always, so I have a list of hotels, and I always put you guys up at the top of the list for where, clients can come when they come in. Yeah, it's you got old school sensibility, wonderful restaurants, real art throughout the buildings and outside as well. The cactus gardens are insane. And I mean, it has everything.
Thanks for being a fan. I really appreciate that.
I'm a total fan. I'm even more of a fan just getting to hear your passion about the place, because that tells me that, it's not just a business to you, just like this isn't just a business to me. It's more than that. it's something that
well, it's nice to smile on your way to work, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, you feel good, and no matter what, you know, there's even sometimes you have to deal with things that aren't very pleasant, but, you know, the upside is you get to be here and enjoy the fabulous things that you have here. It's always, you know, pretty uplifting.
And so, any parting words you want to say? You can talk about sculpture if you want.
Well, just want to invite folks to come out to the nation's first pop-up sculpture show. It's just a wonderful experience. We have work by a number of really wonderful artists. Otto Rigan, I've already mentioned. Curt, Brill.
Represent Otto as well.
Do you?
I have a big piece in front of my house.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It's worth going. If you have Otto Rigan, it's worth going just to see his work. Does he have any of his big gold pieces out there?
Yeah, big gold piece, exactly.
Yeah. I'll go just for that.
It's a wonderful piece of work. You bet.
And how many?
Judith Stewart has a piece out there that it's kind of interesting. When I first saw it, I said, "Oh," because you see it right as you come in. You know, it's like a girl. I think it's the girl with the spiked hair, curly hair, and it sort of reminds me of the first time I heard Bob Dylan, because the first time I heard him, I said, "Oh, that is awful. Somebody's doing that, and they put it on an album, and they think somebody's going to want to buy that." And then the next time I heard it, I thought, well, it's not really that bad. And,
and soon you have
and
all
now
you
just you love it. And her piece struck me that way, you know, which I think is the best art, is when it, I mean, you know, to you personally, is the thing that you look at it and you say, yeah, that's not right. And then you see it again, and it starts to, you know, it forms in you, you know, what it's about. And now I look forward to seeing that piece.
Well, I think sometimes it's exposure too. You have to see it enough. Mm-hmm. So Agnes Martin's paintings were that way for me. It took me a long time to understand her work, and then one day I dedicated like an hour and a half just to sit and look at them, and then I was like, okay, now I get it.
Yeah, and isn't that a wonderful experience when that happens?
Surprising, it really was. I wanted to see if that was there somewhere for me, and it was.
Yeah, things change, you know, right inside your brain. Things change, and so. Anyway, we have it's actually quite an interesting show, because there's a lot of diversity there. There's some representational, there's quite a bit of abstract, there's some quite avant-garde pieces. And, you know, I think it's the kind of thing where I went through it the first time and I thought, that's a pretty good show. And then, of course, I go through it 4 or 5 times every day now, you know, and I think, wow, you know, look at that. I didn't even see that, you know.
And is there a time frame, like 10 to 5 kind of thing?
It's 9 to 7.
9 to 7. Night. Yeah. So, folks, all you have to do is go up to Hacienda del Sol, 9 to 7 p.m. through the end of May. You'll have amazing sculpture. You don't have to go out of a car if you don't want to. You can go see it. And by this time, you could go up and have lunch. You probably have to make an appointment or a reservation, but you can probably have lunch at the Hacienda del Sol as well, right?
Yeah. Starting Thursday.
This Thursday, and this will air next Wednesday, so it'll be open.
Great.
Jeff Timan, thank you so much. I'd shake your hand, but we can't do that anymore.
Thank you, Mark. You know? It's a pleasure. Boy, the time went by fast.
I know, right? We'll go put our masks back on.
Yeah.
And then go attack the world for another day.
Yeah.
Jeff Timan.
Thanks so much for having this business too. It's just terrific. It does a lot for Tucson.
Thank you. Yeah. I get that impression from people, which is very gratifying.
Yeah.
When they come in and say that, you know, this is important to us. And it makes me want to go, okay, well, that's a good reason for me to get up and come every day.
Yeah.
So even during
Catherine, right?
Yeah, even during a pandemic. So
All right. I'll tell you.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you too, Mark. Thanks. Appreciate it.
You bet. That's interesting about Hawaii. So I'm always close to Hawaii. Always.
You know, it hurt the last time I went there. I love the reefs. Yeah. And they're gone.
We need your support for the Medicine Man Gallery channel, so make sure to click the subscribe button and tap the little bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, which we do every morning on Wednesday and Friday. See you soon.